So welcome everybody to session, well, I know it says session 3, but it's session 2 of CHCDFV001. Now, as we said, the 3 sessions have been condensed down into 2. And tonight's session is condensing from sessions 2 and 3 into 1. All right, so let's begin with our acknowledgement of country. Deb, would you like to do acknowledgement of country, please?
Sure, just unmute myself. Okay. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. I've just got the captions of thing in front of me and I can't read behind that. Sorry, Helen.
How's that?
Oh, that's better. Thank you. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land and our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing and hope that we may move forward together in the harmony and the spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging.
Great. Now, is that banner up above the viewing window now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm still learning the captions part.
I was just going to make it up, really. That's all right.
Excellent. All right. So for everybody, our housekeeping, our cameras on, please, whilst presenting. So all our classes are recorded for our learners who cannot make it with us tonight. And we have microphones off whilst I'm presenting, leave them on mute, and you can use your class participation hand emoji, which is down the bottom of your screen, called reactions. And there's a little hand emoji there that you can press to put your hand up. Break times tonight, one at 7 and one at 8 for about 10 minutes each. We also have no smoking or vaping on screen. It's out of respect for you that I don't do that, not that I smoke, but also around that respectful practices that we have in the industry. Trigger warnings. Now, some of the content from tonight may stir adverse reactions for you. And if that's happening, I would like for you to be able to reach out and talk to somebody. And I'm also going to give you some information on those other connection lines. But it's important that as we're workers in the community about regulating our own emotions, and there will be times when we will come up against things that stir quite an emotion for us. So it's important that we learn to regulate that and manage that in that process. And respectful relationships, please, in our classroom. It's around being mindful about your words. It's about respect for the opinions of other people. And we're all learners in this together. So it's about thinking about using that dialogue that we would use in the industry as workers: respect, empathy, deep listening, and leaving our biases aside, because that is our duty of care. And that's a duty of care that will uphold in these services. And if you actually breach that, it's actually a chargeable offence depending on what the level of the breach is. And let's make sure that you're being kind to yourself each week. Take some time out to relax, relax your mind, get out that fresh air, and give your mind some rest time. Now, resources for adverse reactions. As we're talking about, every now and then something might happen and you have an adverse reaction around to content or in the industry when you're working. It's important to have resources available for yourself. And here we have the 13 Yarn for First Nations people, Lifeline 131114, Beyond Blue. Beyond Blue also has an app that you can just do texting with. We have the mental health line, and this is all about you, your self-regulation, the ability to understand and manage your behavior and your reactions to feelings, because sometimes in the field, a situation could bring back memories, a person's story, and it's how we deal with that in that area. And often we can debrief with our colleagues, with our line manager. But if we're getting that practice in now before we're out there, you'll go out with some extra skills in your toolbox. So tonight, it'd be great if I pressed record, wouldn't it? Oh no, I did press record. I forgot I did. I just had this sudden thought I hadn't. Rights and responsibilities of clients and workers, and identifying client needs. We'll also, what's happened to my screen? There we go. You touch one little button and off they go. Sorry. Just bring out my panel. Okay. We're also looking at the needs for assessment, responding to client needs, and the referral sources that we're going to be using in the industry. So identifying client needs. Okay, so I'm just hearing that you cannot see the captions. Is that correct? It's not showing up?
Not on my screen, no, Helen.
Not on yours, okay.
No, but if I click show captions on the bottom, it does. But that might not work for your recording, I don't know.
Yes, okay. So Deb, there's nothing coming through at all there.
I can see mine are fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure what's happening there for you, Louise.
Well, as long as it comes through for the recording, that's brilliant. And then if anyone needs it online, they can, if they don't have it, they can just click show captions. So that's totally fine.
Oh, okay. So if you click the captions box for everyone down the bottom, Kathleen. You got your mic off, Kathleen.
Here we go again. There is a black box at the top, but I think it covers things that you
Yes, but if
need, but not us.
Yeah, your black box, if you go down the bottom of your screen and press captions on,
Yeah.
CC,
Yeah.
that should bring up the writing on that black box.
No.
No? Okay. I'm not too sure what's going on.
It should bring the writing up, but it's not in the same place. That makes a difference.
Okay. All right. Let's have a look at identifying client needs. So often when we're working with and trying to find out information, we'll have interviews with clients, family, or they often bring in their significant others as well. And there'll be questionnaires that you might have from your organization as an intake process as well. And you will also gather that information to build up the case notes and build up that documentation. And there could be a classification tool on their level of support that's needed. And you will also be collecting information on previous files Don't forget, we always get our client consent here as well. And I've given you a link here to Black Dog Institute. And this is, I'll just copy that for you and put it in the chat. And you can bring up the types of information that you might need as an assessment form, just for your toolbox to add to that, and look at different case documentations and risk assessments and things like that. So, client needs and rights. So it's important to be aware of the various needs and rights of the client when working with them. This includes the right to economic support, and you have the right to respectful care and service regardless of race, gender identification, social status. You have the right to privacy and confidentiality. You have the right to express your ideas and opinions without fear or ridicule. So this is about also holding that space for our participants to be able to share these things in with us. It's a matter of trust that they come to us and be able to talk to us about that. And they're trusting us with that information. We then do the same back around respect and dignity and the consideration of this information, how important it is. We also, as workers, have the right to be respected. And you also have the right to be able to support the client with decisions and choices and access to services and information. As a client, you have the right to an ongoing assessments and referrals to specialist services. So your duty of care in this service, though, is about a legal duty to provide a reasonable standard of care and to act in ways that protects their safety, as a duty of care exists when it could reasonably be expected that a person's actions or failure to act may cause injury to another person. Think about the client's safety, their rights, especially if you're working in the sector around homelessness and intake with domestic and family violence services and AOD services. There's more risks involved around the emotions that might come with clients and people who are connected to them. Right. We've talked about the rights of safety, but it's a responsibility of ours as a worker. And when a client enters or a participant enters the service, there's often a service agreement that you'll have between the participant and the organisation that you work with that actually outlines these rights and responsibilities. Each organisation will have their own version of these, but it's based around the duty of care and the responsibilities that they have to keep everyone safe in that work environment. And it's also about agreeing to provide the service that they say they're going to provide as an agency. And for organisations, they're trying to work out the various needs and rights of participants when working with them. And our job here, as our duty of care, is a legal duty to take responsibility to ensure that no one is harmed. It's also about that information process and sharing, making sure that we're adhering to policies. It's also in workplaces, it's also about our workplace health and safety responsibilities as well. And if you think somebody is at risk of harm, Sorry, somebody's just trying to get in the room, but they're not showing up. Okay. Sometimes they don't show up on the screen. So what counts as a duty of care? You, A, provide a safe workplace. Ensure the premises are free of risks. The organisation is the responsibility to make sure that you have safe entry and exit zones. The organisation should provide health and safety signage, and that's a regulation that's required by workplace health and safety. And there's also ensure that electrical response equipment for sirens and alarms be installed. The other part of our responsibility is around the consent, gaining the consent from participation for participants. We're there to respect their dignity, and they have a right to refuse any services that we refer to them, and they can also withdraw with working with our service as well. And this will be in a written agreement. And your service your service delivery, when you're using case management approaches, when you're working with participants and their children, it's about identifying their immediate needs first, and then you will have short-term and long-term goals. But those immediate needs in domestic and family services are around that crisis need. We have to very quickly review what is going on for the participant, and if there is children there with them as well. And don't forget too, often families will come with dogs, pets. So how do we actually deal with that as well? We actually have to make sure that we are creating safe spaces, developing follow-ups, referrals. We also will be often organising a safety plan for some participants. And it's crucial to get this right to meet the client's needs, because the client's needs right there and then is about their safety. And we have a duty of care to get that right and in place as quickly as possible. So identifying and responding to risks or threats to safety. It's really important to identify the risks that the participant may present with and how to respond to these. So what might be a risk that a participant might bring with them to the service? Does anybody have any ideas? So think about the risk of somebody who's escaped from a domestic and family violence situation. Jacinta?
Oh, I was just saying what Philip's just written down. Yeah, a violent partner or perpetrator who's actually following them and, you know, might be waiting outside, might be trying to get into the building.
Yes, exactly. Kath? You got to turn your mic on, Kath.
They might be really unwell.
Yes, that's true. Yep. And how are you going to respond? Let's say go with the violent partner coming in after that participant and demanding to come into the service. How are you as a worker going to respond to this in your workplace environment? Kathleen?
Try to isolate yourselves and the person, of course, from that person and contact the police.
Yes. It's also crucial here that for you to follow your organisational policies and procedures here on risk assessment and crisis management, because crisis management is crucial to everyone's safety, and it's about you, how you identify and report risks and letting your manager know, and the risks that could happen to participants and children are identified and managed immediately. Also, that police notification is crucial. Often you'll find in services, especially with domestic and family violence, they'll have a line directly to either the community police liaison, and that gets more instant support quicker to a service, and it's usually a pre-arranged arrangement that happens, and there's a special hotline number that they use, and that actually activates, they know when that call's happening. It's a crucial moment. So they're already coming prepared for crisis management and lockdown. Often the service itself might go into lockdown, and there's a process that you would have been trained as induction around lockdowns. Yeah. So you have, as Philip says, so where having your linking organisations is important. So those safety measures that are in place are crucial around services around this to keep everybody safe in that. It's also part of our jobs around looking at the changes and events. If we're identifying client needs, if they're physically coming into the service, if we're seeing any evidence of injury or any change in the overall health of somebody, we have a duty of care to report that. And often any serious concerns go straight to your manager or business manager, service line manager, whatever you want to call them. And there'll usually be a protocol in the organization around how you do this, because it's about reporting any impact that you may have seen or witnessed that's comes a big concern. That could either be a mandatory reporting issue, as well as somebody is at risk of harm or at risk of causing harm. Remember our reporting duties here. It's crucial alongside of that risk management that our notes, our clear, concise notes, are a record that are accurate, they're relevant to what's happened. They're certainly going to be current. So you've got to keep that currency. You might even have times down. You'll certainly have times and dates on them, but they're to remain objective. You're just reporting what you've seen. You're not bringing in any thoughts or possibilities. You're just recording what you see. What is relevant exactly then to the incident. So let me also in that note taking as well, when you're making files, it's also important that we have documented any changes for our participants, because if somebody else needs to come in and pick up and work with that family as well, or participant, you have to make sure that that documentation can be managed by another worker, so your notes are clear, concise, and that those notes are managed effectively. So especially around confidentiality, how are they stored in the service? There will be a procedure in organisations, especially with domestic and family violence services, around how information is stored, how it is accessed by workers. So often there's codes that you can only use to get into certain information. So to do with those practices, organisational policies, procedures and practices, we also have working client assessments, and for family and domestic violence aspects, gathering that enough information to assess the urgency of the client's needs. So you have to remember, we've got different levels of crisis needs here. Identifying the difference between responding to a client in crisis and responding to a client with longer term needs. This divides the service that you are giving. So a client in crisis is immediate actions to be taken right now. You will have protocols to follow, but that is around safety, police identification. You're looking for safe emergency housing. Whereas the longer term needs could be about planning to help somebody leave a place of residence. Putting into action slowly, the participant's not quite ready to leave, but they want to work towards that. So that is an action plan that steps out the processes, and you'll have the participants' goals of when and where they want to do things, but they're just not ready right now. So it's good to have the processes in place, and that's what we call our safety plan, our safe exit plans. But that's a process. It certainly is a process, because you've got to think of all the risks that the participant might be taking and what they need to prepare. So if you're helping somebody do a safety exit plan, it's about getting your paperwork in order, taking your essentials. You've got to make sure that they're not accessed as if somebody's having coercive control in the home, how are they going to access these papers? So often people plan a slow process. But for those who have an urgency and leave in a crisis, your action is coming in straight away. You're in crisis mode, and you will be trained in your organization of how to work in crisis mode. It is a process. It is a step-by-step process. All the while, your case management for these participants, helping ensure safety, calming down, whilst you're trying to get information as well. It's quite a juggle. It is quite a juggle, but your communication skills, your support, letting people know that they're in a safe space is crucial to be able to get that communication happening. Because overall, when this is happening in an organisation, behind the scenes, there's the allocation of services, budgets, where they're putting the most money into, the identifying all the legal possibilities and procedures that organisations must continually update. That's something that often is quite often visited every 6 to 8 weeks at times, because policies and procedures might need to change depending on what's happened in the organisation itself. Now, when we're talking also around case management, we have 5 principles here that we're looking at that also includes cultural safety. And for all of our participants, self-determination and participation in decision-making is crucial. The respect for and protection of their own beliefs and culture, and the equality and non-discrimination. So let's take it away just from cultures. Let's look at the whole spectrum of people in our society. If we participate with everyone with self-determination, participation in decision-making, respect for difference, because we could start to name vulnerable groups, and each vulnerable group has a level of high needs. But if you work on the premise that everyone has a high need and everyone has an equal right to that high need, your service is going to demonstrate equality and non-discrimination. There are considerations to have for vulnerable groups. But if you have the policy and you, in your framework, what you're working at that level all the time, you will have an inclusive practice here. So also too, just as I mentioned here, as cultural safety, the importance for our First Nations people and the Torres Strait Islander people. There's also different cultural challenges here. So our cultural awareness and practice also needs to include these, because the perspectives can change. And if we're not practicing around cultural safety in our workplaces, we're not having clear value-free, open and respectful communication, we're not going to be able to offer that to our participants either. And think about where some of our vulnerable groups in our community come with, for First Nation people, intergenerational trauma, past traumas, isolation, the stolen generation, just to name a very small few. But we then have all our other vulnerable groups of people as well. So if we can work under a big umbrella and have our expectations as a worker, including all of this awareness every time we work with an individual person. Respect, trust, openness, and value of difference. If there's anything I can teach you around working in the sector, those 4 things help build the framework of inclusive in practice in the sector. These are characteristics that you can build up. But if you can aim for those and bring your authentic self as well, our sector will be all the better for it. Now, when we have policies and procedures in organisations around intake processes, our values and principles of the organisation that we are working for are forefront. So we'll all be able to work with an organization that has a value and mission statement. That needs to be enveloped in our practice. And you will have procedures that you must follow. That's your legal and ethical obligation to the organization to use these. You will also have obligations around processes of how you do referrals, gain consent, duty of care, mandatory reporting, risk and crisis management. All these documentations are under what we call the legal and ethical procedures and practices of an organization. When you see something written in your assessment tasks and it asks a question, what are the legal and ethical obligations of an organization to, and then it will state what it wants you to find. When it asks legal and ethical obligations, we're looking for acts and government legislations here. It could be the Discrimination Act, could be the Privacy Act, could be the Mental Health and Wellbeing Act of 2022. Don't forget the year is really crucial here because there are addendums that happen to these acts as well. But the original act date is crucial because it has a framework of how you work with that. Now, I know with some of our assessments, when people see, learners have seen legal and ethical obligations, they're thinking of the legality side of it around the law. Well, this is the law, but it's about an act or a legislation that's in place to protect people in the industry. It's not about the law as per se in solicitors, police, courts. It's a different perspective here. Legal terms and the work under these umbrella legislations are legal. You are bound legally to do these things, but it doesn't mean a law act. So when you do see that, think about that. The ethical obligations are around the values, the equity, the inclusiveness, and often to considering the barriers around those two. The barriers to ethical obligations that can be there. Don't forget keeping documentation and information about our participants, making sure that we're following our principles of the company's policies and procedures. So you'll often have a communication process policy. You'll often have a policy on how to do risk management and crisis intake in services like domestic and family violence. And you will be shown these in your induction into an organization. If you're not following these relevant policies and procedures and you breach that, if a court orders the papers for a certain participant and you've missed gaps in the processes, you could be liable, not the organization. If the organization hasn't taught you properly, they're liable. But if they have shown you the processes that they expect and you don't do it, you're liable because you have not followed and adhered. The word is adhered here to your training. If you have never been trained, that's the organization's issue and you need to speak up. I have not been trained in this process. Can I have training, please? You shouldn't be asking. It should be what's given to you in your intake induction. But we're not in a perfect world. So I want you to think about when you're starting with an organization, if you feel you're missing out on some induction papers or you learn about processes along the way and you haven't been trained in it, please speak up. That's about identifying gaps. And if we can prevent any harm to our participants by doing that, it's a crucial step that you take on board as a worker. Kathleen?
I just wanted to say there that it can be very hard to prove that something hasn't been done. For example, that you haven't been given training.
Yep, can be.
So you need to, that's a good reason for needing to ask for it.
Yep.
And document it.
Yes,
Sorry.
so when you're training, you should be signing. So it's a good point, Kathleen. So signing once you've done your training. It should be also noted by your supervisor or manager that you have attended the training and you have understood the training. So often in organizations, they can say, yes, they attended, but have you understood? A good organization will ensure that you understand what you have just learned and been trained to do. Right. Now, let's have a look at crisis situations and long-term support. And we're going to go into breakout rooms for about, well, let's go for about 6 minutes. And you're going to discuss what may occur if there is inefficient or non-existent long-term support for the client. Now here, no worries, Sarah. Here, just remember, a crisis situation is short-term. That is immediate. Long-term support, that stability over time, is about stepping and planning. In domestic and family violence is about leaving and gaining financial stability, safe housing, support, and long-term support for the client, because you don't want them to escalate an issue. So I want you to discuss what may occur if there is inefficient or non-existent long-term support of the client. Just, I'll put that in the chat as well. Right. Now let me just go and get my breakout rooms. Introduce yourselves when you get in there. Talk about how you're going with your study so far, if you wish. And let's get into that. Choose one person to bring back to present to the group your findings, please. And then we'll discuss that when we come.
Well, yeah, what I was like, we're thinking of is that, when that occurred, there will be a post support and lack of communication.
Yes.
And services will be very slow, and there will be financial issues as well.
Yes.
So there will be a struggle in financial line and poor communications, and even you can go, the struggle will come to your housings or something like that.
Yes,
and
yes.
it will affect you so much, like both communication, both financial status, and it having a problem of having a problem of having a problem with your goals.
Yes.
Yeah. So those few things will actually definitely happen in the client life, and they will find those struggles, yeah, having trouble with their goals and financial status, and also having communications problem also as well. That's the little thing I came up with.
Wow, you did really well.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you're in a room on your own again. Oh my gosh.
Like it's actually like it pushes me to learn more.
Oh dear. Thank you, Patience.
Thank you.
All right, Danielle and Viola, did you work together to come up with some responses to our question? And I know Danielle mightn't have the
Yes,
speakers. Yes.
chat here really.
Okay, so might be better to put it in the chat, Danielle. Okay, so whilst Danielle's doing that, let's have a look. Kathleen and Louise.
Hiya, I'm going to start talking for our group. Kathleen and I got slightly distracted, but we had a really good conversation about the nursing system and how you look at the patient on the bed rather than the long-term support. So I think it was really related, talking about actually that long-term support once you get out of hospital, but in this case it's out of long-term, short-term crisis support. If you don't have those networks and safety in place in the community around you, you're more likely to not succeed. So if you've got safety measures in place, whether that's different supports or people to talk to or a counsellor or that network of other people who have a lived experience, you're more likely to succeed and have better outcomes for yourself.
Definitely. And Louise, we have some news to share.
You do. I was very lucky. I've just been interviewed for a job, and so I'm going to be a caseworker for domestic abuse, and I start in June.
So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All this relevant information here coming through for you.
Yeah, got a lot to learn very quickly.
Well done, you. Congratulations.
I've handed my notice in, so that was a very nice feeling. So my safety net has now gone.
Aha. But you will build new connections, networks, collaborate. Oh, well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, room for Jacinta and Zoe.
I'm going to do the talking for us, but Zoe and I had a great conversation.
Excellent.
And lots of ideas, especially from Zoe. But some of the things we looked at was that the risk would be with, insufficient or non-existent support would be the person due to financial risk might actually revert back to that relationship, or they might even, without ongoing support or counselling, may end up in another relationship. For financial security, if they've got children, they might be traumatised. There could be violence. Again, it's really, if there's no safety net and support, that person will be, really suffering trauma. They may not make good decisions or be in a position to make any decisions. And they could be at risk at homelessness. There could be violence to pets. Yeah, I mean, it could be just a complete and utter nightmare, and it could be worse. Things could be a lot worse than when they first presented for support.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true. It's that perpetual wheel going around, but basically they're in reverse and going over those same behaviors, falling back into patterns, because it's what you know. Not that it works, not that it's good for you, but how do I get out of this hole? Great work. Thank you. Great learning there. I think what did you find that you took out of that, Jacinta? Like for your own learning, what stood out for you?
Do you mean through the conversation?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, I think for both of us, just looking at, yeah, what's going to happen? Like that person's presenting, but if there's no safety net, no support, and all they've had is some crisis support, you know, what are you going to do? Especially if you've got children, you've got no financial security, all of those, you've perhaps got no support around you. What are you going to do? You might end up going back to the perpetrator, or you might be tracked and found, or just end up in another abusive relationship. So I think it's that makes you realise that if that support isn't adequate or long-term, in a way there could be more damage done, because the person could have already been traumatised, and be really difficult. If I could just give an example, say so, you know, from my own experience, this is years ago, 20 years ago, I got myself out of this relationship. I was lucky enough to be able to do that financially, but I went to see a counsellor, and one of the things she said to me was, "Oh, has he got a gun?" And I said, "What?" And it just traumatised me so much. You know, my anxiety was already like that. And, you know, I thought, why did you even say that? You know, I think with that, you know, this wasn't a particularly good counsellor, or, well, you know, it wasn't useful. Yeah.
How, if you took that information, how would you put that into your practice then, in your future practice?
I think it would be very much just asking the right questions. How do you feel? What's been happening? Do you think that person could realistically do you harm, rather than, you know, going to that extreme, which they wouldn't have. But, you know, okay, what's the reality, and, you know, that type of thing. But this was, yeah, it was just a side, you know, left to field question. And really at the time it was really my anxiety that was hyperventilating. Yeah.
But as it's been pointed out too, by Frankie, that it can be asked because of being on rural properties as well, or it could be what's been happening in the community over the past few years, events that could have happened.
Yeah, so, and I mean, we're seeing that all the time. It's awful. Or have they got access to any kind of, well, anything can be a weapon, you know?
Yeah, but yes, but it's the depth of the, you know, the seriousness of the weapon as well. And how do you say, how do you work out the level of a seriousness of a weapon, you know, as per se? So around that terminology, but how do we bring that up, but in a safer way? Yeah. So good takeaway for you then.
Yeah, no, it was good. Thank you very much. And thank you, Zoe.
Very good. All right.
Thank you, Jacinta. I had a great time with you too.
Good work, Zoe. All right. Kath and Philip.
Yep, I'll talk, and Kath will jump in if I've forgotten something, sort of thing. So, like, a lot of things been mentioned today, but like some of the things that we thought about was like I went to the extreme, like generational violence, in that sense, social degradation, the worst case death, and that like to be a bit of a fatalist and stuff. But we also talked about the levels of trust, and that so like if clients aren't being trusted, like that is going to affect not only the like abusive relationship that they're in, but it might also like have that ripple effect on the way they respond to their communities, the way they talk amongst friends, families, etc., etc. And yeah, basically like an overall not so good situation. The other thing was also our organisation, like if they're not getting that care, then basically the organisation is going to not be trusted, because it might be like, well, hang on, that's the place we go to. They take us in, they'll give us a cup of tea, we'll talk about it, but they don't actually do anything about it. So therefore, am I going to recommend that to another place, or are we just going to have a really bad, organisation?
Yep.
Is there anything else, Kath?
I just think about if there is no long-term support, then it's quite likely that that person, if they feel like there is no long-term support or plan, that probably resort to drugs and alcohol, sort of escapism, which is leading to homelessness, possibly ending up on the street. Just long-term, really long-term problems, then ongoing long-term problems if there is no long-term support, so no housing. And possibly can lead to perpetrating violence themselves, theft if they're particularly broke, that sort of thing, and declining mental health. If there's no long-term, if there's no support, then absolutely declining mental health, so more severe depression, anxiety, and that sort of thing. That's it.
So it's a layering up of complexities happening here that started out worse in the beginning, in the sense of it's bad enough having to flee and get away from domestic violence, but then, as you say, going back into it or creating more problems on top of by not having the right care. Good identification there from both of you, and especially around that ripple effect of that ongoing language that people might use after the event if they're not supported in a way that helps them break down the crisis that has happened to them, the events, the experience, and how do they share that respectfully too, and how do you teach the next generation that as well? And organizational care, I think in the room we identified also in the main room around that organizational care. Jenny and Frankie also brought up around if the organization is not giving the support or having that good stable structure of workers, and that continual open door builds that unsafety and sureness for for participants. So they'll either end up not coming or going backwards, in that they're harmed by that process as well. So there's a lot to take in here. Thank you for your work. Appreciate it. It's good. All right. Ben, Yana, and Sarah. Have you got somebody to bring back to the room your findings, please?
Yes. Sorry, Helen.
Hey, you're good.
There was no Sarah. I couldn't even see one in the class, but it was Jana and I.
Yep.
And I missed what was said, what the other responses were at the start. Sorry, but we had that the client may find it hard to find meaning and be motivated in the short goals without a long-term goal. They may look elsewhere for support as well. Like, so you may lose them as a client, and they might try and find another care provider.
Yep, true.
And yeah, just also, yeah, it would be a lot harder to, you know, achieve your short-term goals without having like an end result, like without having feeling there's an end to it.
Mm.
And also like the short-term goals without a long-term goal, the short-term goals might not be the right ones if you don't have
Yes.
a long-term goal in mind.
Yep. Yep. So you'd be just perpetuating and treading water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like putting a Band-Aid on, I suppose, but without fixing the actual problem.
Yep. 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 Making those deeper long-term changes, but you need to start somewhere, don't you, with the short-term goals and step it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think that was about it.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. I like that you identified the short-term goals, the importance they have towards the long-term goals. How will you use that in your practice in the future, do you think?
Well, look, I think it would be more appropriate to look at the long-term goals of the end result of where you want to be and then work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose
Yep.
that's probably what it made me think about.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can organize the steps.
Of how to get there, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so to know where you like have an end result of where you want to get to, and then work out how you get there, that would implement the correct short-term goals.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where you can do a little bit of mind mapping or have a whiteboard and working with your participant or a big bit of butcher paper and just mapping out those ideas and the hopes. Because all the while, whilst you're doing that, you're building hope. And that's a crucial step here in the process.
Yep.
Thank you. Excellent.
Okay.
All righty. Christine, Kay, and Ben. Who's going to present to the group your findings?
Are you going to do it, Christine? Seeing you had the biggest input.
Yes, I will do it. I just I'm trying to navigate with one hand here. I'm happy to do it. Yeah, look, obviously the worst case scenario, if somebody's long-term support isn't being met, they could be murdered, and it's happening all the time. They've obviously escalated the situation by leaving the perpetrator, and they've antagonized the situation, and you know, it can completely blow up, and they can be found if they're not protected, and they can be murdered, and it's happening all the time. That's obviously the worst case scenario. I was reading an article in the Sydney Morning Herald today about a woman who left a violent relationship, and she is struggling so much financially that she's saying, maybe I would have been better off staying put until the kids were a bit older and trying to get some money together and then getting out, because the financial situation is so bad. And then we talked about homelessness. Of course, a lot of people that leave, that fall through the cracks, they don't get the support, they end up being homeless. We've seen the ads, you know, Mission Australia's advertising their winter campaign was all about the woman living in her car with her son. You know, it happens. And then, Ben brought up the fact, you know, the impact on children, who, you know, it causes them massive instability, insecurity and whatnot. And then, you know, the situation perpetuates and the kids end up turning to drugs and alcohol and blah, blah, blah. And yeah. So, you know, the importance of following through and, you know, making sure that they have that long-term support is essential. It's vital.
And
Have I missed
that
anything, guys? Ben?
No, I think you answered it all.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I was saying though as well, Helen, is that you mentioned there is about like the fact that you know, that people, you know, there's the crisis situation and there's the long-term support. And you were saying about how the long-term support can start even before the person leaves the relationship, leaves the abusive relationship. Now, I wasn't aware that you could do that even. Like I did, you know, if I was, let's say, you know, kind of, okay, let's say I'm in an abusive relationship and I really want to get out, but I didn't realize that you can turn to somebody. And I was saying kind of, you know, is it worthwhile doing a campaign, like kind of that the government does some sort of a campaign about this so that people know that they've got that support, that there is that support available to them. But then, what was it, the other lady that was involved in our session, she said, well, that might actually kind of antagonize the perpetrator, you know. So I don't know, that there's probably a way around that, you know what I mean, that you can sort of, maybe there's ways of communicating with people that are vulnerable, I don't know, without the perpetrator actually, you know, kind of being educated about that themselves, you know?
Yeah. I think the education's based around domestic and family violence is to seek us help. That's getting that message out that there's all different types of help. They're not defining it, but it's about educating people to reach out for help. That's the barrier because in that barrier is fear.
Oh, absolutely.
And hopelessness.
Absolutely. But I think that, you know, kind of the message around, you can do this really quietly. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait until you've actually left the family home. You can sort of do it nice and quietly, you know, on the side, so that you won't be seen and whatever, you know what I mean? It won't be picked up on.
Yeah. That's like Kathleen says, you know, services can provide literature about development of their long-term plans and leaving safety plans. But it's like you say, that awareness, if it's not there, like you didn't know, you wouldn't think, you think you're going there because they're going to get you to a service and they're going to get you out of the house now, but you know that's not going to work for your circumstances. So having a safety plan, but this is some of the amazing work that these services are doing. And there's planning can go for months and months until they've got an right opportunity
to get out. Yeah.
And it's being the organization being aware of that. There's also services to help move goods and belongings, you know, to help somebody do that. It's a real process. And these services are doing that behind the scenes. We don't hear enough about this work. We only hear the devastation. We also know that many people have been supported to get out and be safe.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up around was that financial instability. So at the moment in Queensland, through Uniting Care, escaping violence payment is $1,500 for financial assistance, but that's only if you're eligible, and that's help to buy goods and services, removalists, helping with a bond. That's not going to go far.
No.
That's not going to go far.
No, it's nothing. It's not enough at all. It's not enough at all.
It's something, but compared to the costs of what it costs Australia, the government. So in 2018, it was $22 billion it cost the country. That has now been closer up to $40 billion it's costing the country. So that crisis payment, there's also crisis payment from Centrelink as well. So just so you know, having to move due to unforeseen circumstances, so not directly related to domestic violence, but it's a crisis payment that you can get, and it equals a week's pay. So there again, not a lot of support for that long term, having to readjust, and as you say, that insecurity. Good work, good findings there. Thank you. Kath?
Yeah, sorry, I was just reflecting on the importance of services. I mean, for a person, you know, who doesn't have any long-term support, I think the most important thing is to try it in either a short-term goal or a long-term goal is to get a good support network around them, because without that, if that person's been, you know, in that situation where they already don't have any support, then what hope, you know, do they have? So I would see that as like the number one priority. So linking those whatever services, making sure they're aware of what support they can get. I mean, maybe the Department of Housing's got some kind of crisis housing, you know, grant. Yeah, but without that, without enhancing their knowledge on how to access support, which they clearly have not been able to, that's why they don't have any, would be, I would say, the number one priority.
So for you as a future worker, what would you take from that for your future practice?
Building, I would really focus on how to help that person get some support networks around them immediately, whether they're staying in the violent in their situation they're in, or whether they've already left or planning to leave. Either way, that they've got at least, you know, even one support network or a number of support networks. That no person's an island, and particularly trying to get out of that dangerous or that kind of traumatic situation. People need support to be able to do that.
Yep.
Otherwise,
good identification there.
Under a bridge. Yeah.
I like that you can see that for the future, what that'll be a focus for you, which is great to see. Thank you for sharing. Deb, George.
I can be George as well, if that's all right.
All right.
Look, a lot of it has already been said, so I'll just read from a little bit of notes here. So we noted a lack of stability, no ability to track progress, see gaps, see new needs or escalations. We also had another point of view from the client who feels isolated, feels not good enough, worthless, left alone, mental health deterioration, and also the ability for the organisation as well. No documentation could be in some areas, no tracking, no client progress stated, the services required are not organised. There is a feeling of around here of neglect, and it is totally misses the needs of the client. That's just picking those out of there.
Yeah, and have you worked in that sector at all, Deb?
No, I haven't worked in that part, no.
Okay. It's interesting. Kathleen, you just made some comments here about community services and having immediate support available during a crisis, the police, let's have a look at what else if you got here. And but ensuring that you have immediate links to activate a crisis response. That's another crucial point to have in those numbers that you could, as a worker, supply your participant with, and having these responsive information to be able to have with you. Do you want to talk to that, Kathleen, please?
Yeah, when listening to these horrible cases of domestic violence, and often hearing that the police, for example, may have known the victim for some time because the victim has approached the police. There may be an AVO on the person, and you know, just very recently, the guy who was granted bail, and he had an ankle bracelet and he had an AVO. And I just think if the community organisation and the police can work together, then the police can certainly tap into the community organisation in terms of the history of the violence, and just hopefully be more responsive when a crisis, before a crisis does occur. I don't know if I articulated that very well, but I'm talking about prevention. So organisations working together to have the right information available, so that, for example, somebody fleeing domestic violence might want to ring their community organisation before they get in touch with the police, because the police might have fobbed them off time and time again. So they may ring a community organisation and say, you know, he's outside with a gun, and the community organisation would be able to initiate a crisis response with the police at that point.
I think it's also important here to point out that the police don't all the time fob off calls.
No.
It's certainly that they actually have different units within the police that address domestic and family violence. They're trained specialists in that. They also have community liaison police officers as well. I think it's also too around those historical events that get called out to, that there might be delays to. But I think overall the huge amount that they have to respond to, there's just not enough people for the services, and this is where having that, maybe that link in with identified community services to help bridge that gap there of service is a good idea. And I know there's a lot of that work like that going on in the background, but once again, you don't hear about it, and there's probably not enough of it, because it's about getting funding to get those programs in place as well. And keeping that longevity as well.
I didn't want to defame the police force. It was just the importance of having those links and that background knowledge of a client.
And this is where people get frustrated and feel that that's what's happening.
Yes.
And so it's real happening in the community, but we don't know what it's like coming from their end as well. And the frustration that I know, I spoke to a police officer from Bundaberg recently, and their frustration of not being able to get from one side of town to another and not having enough officers, whilst one thing was going on, trying to go to another crisis where they had 4 other units out at other crisis, that they couldn't get to enough crises in time, and having to split their workers and break the teams down so they were unsafe in responding, but then getting other emergency services and connecting with them to come, to just have that force of strength there for protection. So, you know, even in smaller towns, that's all happening. You know, Bundaberg's not that big a place in Queensland. So it's interesting. And that's just one town out as an example of that's happening, but it's happening over the country. But yes.
Hopefully new legislative changes will decrease the load a bit for the police, so that there are less people out there who might perpetrate domestic violence. Perhaps.
We can build hope.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for participating in that. I think we had some really rich information. I want for you to take that, and how will you invest that into your knowledge for your future practice? What will you take from that exercise? If you were working with somebody, it doesn't even have to be in a domestic violence service, but they might present with that in a different service as well, as one of those complex issues that have come in. So they might be there about homelessness, but what drove them to the homelessness? So then if you have some awareness around what is happening with domestic and family violence across the country, it gives you a broader spectrum of how you work with that participant as well. So let me just go back to sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, so safety, physical and emotional security, the assistance and the protection that we can offer participants when we're responding to a crisis situation. So the priority when responding to a crisis is always to keep people as safe as possible. This is done by providing advice, support, interventions, police attending that person's home, providing access to safe emergency accommodation if it's available. Now, just remember here, the housing crisis here, that emergent safe housing is quite rare to get now. So in those safety, for those fleeing domestic and family violence, those safe houses that we used to have are under pressure by from the need. So often hotels are used in those circumstances. And just remember, people also leaving in a crisis situation might have medical needs as well. And often moving to a place of safety and moving out of that situation also requires legal advice. And you as that worker can be offering the person the choices of actions to take, offering referrals, offering information to services, what's available right now. So it's all well and good to advocate for another service or to provide something. What is their capability of doing that? So I know when I worked in homelessness, being able to access another service at time to find housing across Queensland it was. So from South Queensland right up to North Queensland, the government has a website called Quip and Ship, and that takes the Queensland Housing Information Platform, and that takes the direct information from organisations of people seeking housing, emergency housing. And that also brings up the availability across the state. And we would have to vie for some of those houses, but certainly some of them were way out. will the participants want to go out that far? Not even being able to have that referral process stopped our housing service to the point where we could offer food, clothing, information, resources. We had no shelter to provide until we linked up with Anaconda and were able to give out tents, sleeping bags, and cooking equipment. So here we are having to improvise and flip what we had in place 2 years before, suddenly become that clogged because there was short-term housing and long-term housing in services, as well as your Department of Housing. And usually with the Department of Housing, it took many years. Services like the one I was working in had short-term for 3 months or long-term 6 to 12 months. And that was a process where you help that person move on to private accommodation, private rentals. So the private rental stock went. Everybody had to stop and sit in those short-term housings. The long-term people had nowhere to move on to. So the short-term people couldn't move on. So we couldn't do our intake and keep the system rolling. So we probably sat still for around 8 to 9 months, not being able to intake and move along. All we had to do was crisis manage people in those homes and do the best we could to try and find long-term permanent housing, which even going out regional become very short. So the needs has grown much more in the communities over the years, and it's a struggle. The same for domestic and family violence. We used to be able to, I worked in a women's health centre that also had the Centre Against Sexual Violence in there as well as women's health. And we were able to find, we had a couple of safe houses that we would utilise across Brisbane and southeast Brisbane. And we would be able to get people going in as the need arose. That become very hard to perform as well because there wasn't enough houses to go to. So it's a perpetual problem. So then that creates a problem where people won't reach out for support. But it's about that education, keeping in contact with them, keeping that verbal language happening, the connection, as much as we could try and do. Even though services at times can't fulfill their full service, what they're providing. So it can be quite frustrating, but it's about connection, helping build hope, and working as much as you can to support that person to have some safety plan or safety where they are. And don't forget also too, when we're offering information, services, it's a links to counselling and legal advice and financial planning is crucial too. And you often got those services that you can have by phone for that. So in that, I think we actually heard from one of our groups coming back from the rooms around the welfare of the children, and including in the safety plan that strategies for keeping people who are affected by domestic and family violence safe. Remember, you're working with people who have been traumatized, and there's all different guidelines for safety with each organisation, but they mostly have strategies and contingencies for if the person is staying but planning on leaving, or is in the process of leaving, or has left. So each has a plan for those who are in those stages. For each participant, their stages will be different. That for each stage, the risks are different. So the strategies have to change here. For a person's partner is likely to be very angry and volatile after the person's leaves, which is what we discussed tonight. So this is a crucial, dangerous time. And protecting the children, if there are children in the relationship, is the foremost crisis management that parents can do. And as a service worker and a service organization, what they can provide around support for that, and ensuring that their safety is paramount. This is where we often could be tapping into that participants who's seeking the support. We could be tapping into friends, relatives, people they might know that might live further away, trying to help expand their network. Who could they reach out to? If you were doing long-term planning with them, that would be a part of that plan. And trying to identify networks that they could link in with for support when the time was either to leave or in that crisis mode. Who do they know that they might be able to get some short-term safe support from, as in shelter? All right, let's just leave that here right now. I'm just going to press stop share here. Are there any questions about what we've been talking about so far? Okay, so let's go and have a 10-minute break, back at 8:23.
A bit exciting.
Okay, so I'm just going to go and bring up assessments for this. So to bring up assessments or to unpack here, I often go through a learner portal and bring up the most current version of that assessment, due to that sometimes the marker guide can be an older version. So just going to bring that up. Okay. All right. So let's go and have a look at the assessments that we're doing. For this module. All right. So first of all, this is task 1. And you'll have 3 tasks. Item 1 of 11 questions here. This is where you use your learner guide. That's your source of information here. Excuse me. So I just need to move these down a bit. Sorry, I'm just going to bring up my video panel so I can see where everybody is. Just get rid of that. Good. Okay. Whoop. Right. So let's have a look here. So some of the questions in the table below, look at the listed values and philosophies that support the response to domestic and family violence from a support worker's perspective. This is what we've been doing in class tonight. All your perspectives have been out there sharing it. What is the value, the philosophy of that? And give a description. Everybody has the right to live free and from violence and abuse. Give it a description. Why do you believe that? Why is that how is that a possibility? So we've talked about the organisation's dedication to empowering those affected by domestic and family violence. What does that mean? We've been doing and unpacking these questions here tonight. Your philosophy on domestic and family violence is widespread and complex. Talk about what you know here. What's happening in Australia today? Here, you'll see over here, these 3 lines can actually take you through to your next questions. So item 2 is a case scenario that you'll respond to. So if you look at this case scenario, and it's really good to be able to, oops, get out of that. Look at the things that has happened that stand out of importance for you. So Priscilla is a case manager in emergency housing. And she has many clients looking for housing options. So we have a new client, Angelica. She has a child, 4 years old. That's important. Quiet, well-behaved, arrives in a luxury car. She's well-groomed. Priscilla thinks Angelica doesn't look like someone who needs emergency housing. Remember here, domestic and family violence does not choose the victims here. Anybody can be and experience domestic and family violence. Already, what's happening here is the biases coming up for the worker. So think about what could be happening here. She tells she has barely contact with her own family, so she's not having a good social network happening there. She's also been diagnosed with depression, and she fears her husband's behavior. But she's now at the center seeking help, and she's too afraid to return home because she's told a story that she's gone to the doctor, and that's where her partner believes her to be. She's had no receipt to say that she's been to the doctor, so she knows she can't go home because her partner will know she lied. So whilst the worker has sympathy for her, she cannot place her in immediate housing. She instead coaches Angela on establishing a go plan and identifying resources she can access to leave. She tells Angelica that she has clients without her financial resources and education who she has to give priority to. What's happening here? Anyone? And it's crucial.
She's not supporting Angelica at all. She's basically fobbing her off to go with her other clients.
Yes. This is bias. This is discrimination. Kathleen?
Sorry, I was just about to use the word. It's a massive case of discrimination, which means that Angelica and her child might be they are at risk. So that she's just perpetuating that risk if she sends them off. So it's just discrimination all over it.
Yep. So when you're talking about the outline, the values and principles that should have been better applied, Think about what we've just talked about then.
So there's discrimination and safety. I think probably, anyway, I won't say any more
All
there.
right. Yep. So here now, with your new knowledge, how would you respond in this case? What should have been a more appropriate response from Priscilla? Think about what you would do yourself as well. Crucial here. Philip?
So I was just going to answer that, but should I answer it or it's not?
Well, you can have a discussion.
A discussion would be basically like we'd work on her safety plan and stuff. Basically, like to put her into a safe place so we can work like on decisions on what she's actually going to be doing with her life.
And these are all options. Christine?
I just want to ask a question. You know the way Priscilla let on that she was going to a doctor's appointment?
Yeah.
That Angelica was going to a doctor's appointment. Does Priscilla have the right, you know, to make contact with the doctor and put the doctor in the picture, so that if the husband queries where she's been, the doctor said, yeah, she's been here? Is that legally possible?
Not unless she has consent to do that, but
she has consent from Angelica.
That's if she's done that.
But like, so Angelica hasn't actually physically been to see the doctor.
No.
But she could say, well, let's have a telehealth call or a call with the doctor now, and we'll put the doctor in the picture. So the GP, you know, whoever she was supposed to be going to see, she was pretending to be going to see, is in the picture, so that he's wised up. Is that kosher?
Yeah, look, you're getting into semantics here of trying to fill gaps. Right now, this person's standing in front of you in a crisis situation.
Yeah, I know that, but
filling in those little gaps.
Yeah,
not
obviously
something
you're trying to protect them from being, you know,
and I hear what you're
violated.
saying, and it's like putting in a fogging, you know, like event, but you haven't got time for that.
Okay.
You're in crisis mode with this person.
Yeah.
As well as that, the doctor has to observe privacy and confidentiality rules. So he can't say, yes, she's been here, or no, she hasn't. He can't even
court ordered. Yeah.
Yeah. And he can't even engage in conversation with the husband unless Angelica has said that he can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's against the law.
It wouldn't make any difference anyway if the husband, he wouldn't get any information out of the doctor one way or the other.
No, and that's, I think that's just wasting time and resources. It's more important to understand that she and her child are in crisis. She's too fearful to go home. So clearly going home's not a good idea. So better off spending time on developing a safety plan for her and her child, and some emergency housing to get some support for her. I would say. Yeah.
Right. Think about what you would do as a worker, what we've been talking about tonight. Outline the legal and ethical obligations of organisations that demonstrate duty of care to clients. We've been talking about this tonight. Go back over your recording. So you have 11 questions. You have more scenarios to go through. And you're also, in every step of the way, outlining legal and ethical requirements. Now have a look at this one. Outline the legal and ethical obligations of organisations and workers to promote human rights. And identify the relevant documentation for human rights. visit the Declaration of Human Rights. There are 30, and there's actually 31, because there's a 25 and a 25 plus A, human rights. And if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights, what can you identify that promotes human rights when working for people affected by domestic and family violence? Think about those rights as special, because they're all called articles. Article 1 right through. And you're looking at freedom, free from to go anywhere, to be free to do, to move, free from discrimination. What else should they be able to be free from and be able to do? Think about that. Look at the rights. Let me just stop that, and I'm going to go and get task 2. I'll just get, yes, exactly right, Philip. And safety and freedom from violence. Have a look for the article. So if you bring up the Declaration of Human Rights, which we'll just do that really quickly for you. This is relevant to all your work in the future as well. So it's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's done by, created by the United Nations. I'm just going to bring it up here. And now I'll just do my share. All right, here we are with the declaration. Now, I have gone into, let me bring that up. UN.org. So all I put in was the universal, get the right name, the Declaration of Human Rights, and this will take you to the United Nations. Now, there is also an Australian Declaration of Human Rights as well, very similar to this. So this is where they talk about what human rights are about, human flag, the charter. And I'll just bring it up. And here is the Declaration of Human Rights. You will see that there is information about how the declaration came about. And here we have the articles. Article 1, born free and equal in dignity and rights. Think about the rich words they're using here. Article 2, freedom set forth in declaration without distinction of race, language, opinion, property, birth, or status. Think about that woman that came into the service that they thought she was well off and didn't need support. That was Priscilla's perception. What does Article 2 equal? And you have all these articles here. Do look at them, because they all have. Now have a look at Article 7. What is it saying here? These are important for our work. These all matter to our work all the time. And if we are trying to ensure safety for our participants, our people we're working with, the Declaration of Human Rights gives you a structure to work by. It's not a perfect balance in the world that we can try and make all this happen. But if we can structure our work framework around it, that's another thing to have in our toolbox. So I'm just going to now bring up the next assessment. And this is around a research paper. Just bringing that up. Let me share my screen. All right. Just move that over there. Right, so recognize and respond task 2 of 3 research. So in this task, you conduct research online, and offline resources, of course. Good night, Zoe. Now, the purpose of this task is to investigate the context of domestic and family violence in Australia. You have a template that you'll work by. So let me show you what that looks like. Now, also too, this is a paper that you will need to use referencing for. If you have not done referencing before, I am happy for you to make a list at the end of your research, or in each section, which I will show you coming up, a copy and paste of the URL where you've just been, your internet search, but also name the site. So if you've been to the Victorian government's domestic and family violence website, it'll have Victorian government, and then you'll have the URL, and then I want you to put at the end accessed and the date. If you know how to use APA 6 style, there's a citation generator there for you to use if you want to give it a go. I am happy for you to put your research into each section, which I will now show you what that looks like. So that was your task instructions. Here's what it starts off looking like. Your first section, identify, and this question needs correcting, identify and brief the history. It should be identify a brief history of domestic violence in Australia. Include your answer, community awareness, perception, changes of legislation, and triggers for change. Think about the change over a period of time. In your learner guide, you have historical events around domestic violence in Australia, the beliefs that were there. You can do research for historical events on domestic violence in Australia, and you'll notice that we're using the word just domestic violence, not domestic and family violence, because that evolved over time. Kath?
Okay, yeah, hi. Just to clarify, so identify, so you mean, do you mean detail a brief history of domestic violence in Australia?
Identify a brief history of domestic violence in Australia. As I said, this needs rewording. It was just a...
but so that's massive. Like, what length are you looking for?
When they ask for a brief history, you can give 1 or 2 sentences, and then have dot point underneath that, date specific. 1890, first legislation came in.
Okay.
Right? But give an explanation, because we want you to include community awareness, perception, and changes to legislation. So you could start back in 1890, the government did blah, blah, blah. Services only addressed the community perception was that hitting partners was a part of accepted society behavior. In 1910, something rather, in 1920, in 1940, the government brought in a new legislation to battle domestic violence. Think about when feminism came into play. What did that change? That's all in your learner guide, but do some research online, please. Be careful of where you're getting your information from. Look at the reputable websites. And when we say that, we don't want information that's coming from a website that might be about, it's not known and it's not reputable. It's not to even have a lock on the directory URL. So it's somewhere coming from a government website, a proper organization-based website as well as it could be historical findings through other government countries in a excuse me, even if you have links to university sites. So if you do a quick search on historical events of domestic violence in Australia, you've got a newspaper report. We don't just want that. We've got Wikipedia. Now, Anne Rose, historical event. There's a reputable site. safeandequal.org.au. Anything with .org.au is a reputable website. 16 days blogathon. No. Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. Yes. .gov.au. History Council of Victoria, a national disgrace.org.au. These are reputable websites. Even our watch has .org.au. Australian Institute of Criminology. I know that's an interesting read, that one, because I've been there and had a look. It'll take your time researching. But as you can see, there are sites to go to and sites not to go to. So let's bring up those questions. So when you put your response in here, you're only allowed a certain amount of words as well. So I don't think you can go over, I think it'll stop. I think it's around 750, if I believe right. You won't need to do all that for that section. But to answer, if you look at that one question, it says history of domestic violence. Then you have awareness and perception, changes in legislation, changes, and mention the source. So when you've written here, you might have a whole paragraph of 6 to 7 lines. You might have dot points underneath it of historical event timeline. You might want to do a timeline. As long as you explain something in beginning. Over the centuries, government started changing the myth, the beliefs from the 1890s, which were blah, blah, blah. Then go to the next stage. In the 1910s, society believed, and explain that. Were there support for women and families leaving? Were there support for the wider community? Were they gender basing things as well? How have we evolved? Do your answer, copy and paste the URL, put it in there, name the website, put it in, and then source date and put the date you put it. That makes it your work reputable, and it's just very close to a reference. If you have a look at, let's go item 3. So each one is itemized for you. So this is instead of you doing a full report on one page. This helps you focus on the area that you need to research. Provide a summary of at least 7 types of nature of domestic and family violence. Now, this is a summary. So you can identify 7, but please explain them. I don't just want a list of 7 things without an explanation. This could just be 7 dot points. If you're saying physical violence, which means, and give me an example. This could be a shorter area for you to work on, because you're going to need some more work around your myths, 3 myths. Now, there are myths in your learner guide, but there are many more when you research them on the government websites. If you're looking for statistics, especially around your historical events, don't forget the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Amazing statistics on domestic violence across the centuries that they have. So you're going to identify the gender issues here. You're going to outline 3 aspects of domestic violence that impact the safety. We've been talking about that tonight. Think about the rich learning that we've had here tonight. Look at your recording. Outline the impact of domestic family violence on children and young people. Your learner guide has some. Please get onto your government websites to find more information around these. So this will build your report. You have 15 areas here to fill in. Your number 15 is a conclusion. How will you apply this knowledge to the context of family violence to your work in mental health? Think of some of the questions I've been asking you individually. How will you apply that to your work in the future? The work we've done tonight is in here. Go back and watch your recording. Have a look at some of those answers. Look at your learner guide. What will you do? Right, let me just pause there and I'll go back and bring up the next task. Task 3 is a role play. All right. So to prepare for the role play, you must read the scenario and look at the relevant policies from First Access. Now, we want you to demonstrate that you can identify and respond to client needs. The practices, the procedures, and the standards relevant to client situation. Think about what we've discussed tonight around what we need to do in certain situations here. You are going to play the role of Michelle Donoghue who's a counsellor at First Access. Another person from your family, friend, or a colleague here, peer work, one of your peers, or a trainer can play the role of Diane, and that person comes to First Access for support. You have to complete a referral form, a safety plan during the role play, and then you submit this. This takes no more than 10 to 12 minutes. Here is your task 3 role play participant instructions. So these will give you the instructions for the person that's playing Diane. If you click on that, it'll take you straight to it. Read through these instructions, because this is where you can find your questions to ask the client coming in to see you. This is where it's really good to, if you can, print these off and have a Nico pen and sit there and highlight. Because here, Diane, the person who's playing that role for you, this is how they are to be responding. And when you look through this, you can actually look and see questions that you can ask. So about 2 years ago, I got a new job. I worked hard to get there. I noticed the alcohol that the partner was having. He slapped my face quite hard. I took his abuse quietly for a long time. This is if you're going to have a participant with you in your home, or you're doing it with another person online, this is the role that they are going to play for you. Down here, you will see when Michelle asked Diane if she would like additional ongoing support, this is what your participant will respond. Then Michelle asked, do you want to create a safety plan? Here's your script coming out for the role play. Right, so take your time reading this. Think about how you will ask these questions. You don't have to go word from word here. You can explain what a safety plan is in your own words. Your participant will ask these questions of you, and you can respond. And you ask more, here's more suggestions for you to ask questions. Open this up, take the time to do it. Right. Let's go back to the assessment. So here's your scenario once again. You're also going to refer to a Dr. Adam Fitzroy as a medical checkup. So this is your consent. And these are the things we need to see you using. Policies and procedures for client assessment, services, case management, interviewing, your use of resources here, referral, safety plan, discuss strategies, refer to a GP, create a safety plan. Now, this is what you must refer to. These here, the referral form and the safety plan. That will be in your overview in instructions at the beginning, and you come here to First Access EduWorks. You have a username and a password. Now, this is a dummy company to mimic what an organization would look like if you were in a non-profit organization working for. You go into First Access And this is what it looks like. You go into the staff portal. I've already signed in, obviously. I'll log out so you can see what it looks like. It's the staff portal. And it's not going to log me out anyway. You just go in then and there we go. Put your Hayter Institute and Hayter 1, 2, 3. Oh, do it again. Hayter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in you go. This is where you get your resources from. So if I go back over here and I have a look at the resources that I need, the templates, there's an email template you need, a privacy and confidentiality policy. What's the policy on referring on for homelessness? Safety plan template. Let's have a look at that and go and get that. And now when it brings it up like that, hover over it, you'll be able to click on it. And then you can download it. Okay. And that will be your safety plan. That's just one of the things you need to collect. If you go back and have a look in your list, you've got a referral form here that you must have, your counselling plan template. Now, what's the policy on domestic and family violence policies and procedures here? Remember, you're working for First Access. You are following their policies and procedures. We've talked about that throughout the night. So when you go and open that up, you will see information around the practices they expect you to have, the guidelines you follow, and that's going to support your questions and your actions in your role play. This takes time for you to sort through and get all your equipment first before you start your project, your role play. This is crucial in this assessment here to gather all your information first before you go. There are 3 people that you're working with here. And this is why it makes it complex. You have role play 2 with Priyanka, and you have role play 3 with Oliver. And you're doing an email template here as well. And this is where you will need to bring your email template into it. So let me just stop share there. This is complex, but if you go through the steps slowly, gather your resources first, then go back and if you can, print out each scenario and just do one at a time. What do I need for this one? What are the requirements? Look at your role play instructions and start to have a bit of a script forming. We don't want you to read off the script word for word, but have a dialogue that you're going to use. Practice. Reach out to a trainer and use Calendly so we can unpack those questions with you as well. Access that. Let me get you that link so everybody has that. Won't be a second. Right, there's your Calendly link. Oh, sorry, I've just given that to a direct message. Change that. That's your Calendly link that you can book a trainer across the week. And when you go into that, there'll be sections like youth work, community services, mental health, AOD. Click on community services, see what's available. Even youth work will do in that. Trainers across the board are working in both sectors there. And you'll have days that are identified and you go through and book a time. That'll help you unpack, or you can reach out to me and let me know you need somebody to do a role play with, and we can maybe link you up with another learner. But if you can do that in the room here as well. Reach out and see if somebody else wants to do role plays with you. All righty. So any questions before we go? Big night, lots of information. Step into your task 1. See how that information you have will build up towards your report. That report will help you build up the information to your role plays.
Okay. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The role play, if you're doing role play, does the trainer teaches you how to do it if you haven't done it before?
Yes. If you book a session with a trainer, we can show you how to do that as well.
Oh, okay.
Plus in your resources, there's in your resources section in your Accelerate, there is how to do a role play video. Vicky and I have done a 30-minute recording on how to do a role play and what we're looking for. Go and have a look at that. So when you go into your learner portal, on the right-hand side, there's resources. Bring that down. There's also how to record a role play. But reach out and ask a trainer as well with Calendly.
All right. Thank you so much.
I've got to catch up with you anyway, so we've got to make the time to,
Okay. Thank you so much.
No worries, Patience. All right. Let's have a breath, everyone. That was huge. Lots of information.
A lot. Thank you so much. You're doing great.
I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, Patience. The thing is with your assessments, just tackle one part at a time.
Okay.
And even though the role play, it looks really full, the biggest part you're going to be doing is gathering your information first and reading.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Okay. If we come to the way we're supposed to, do we have to do a placement?
With ComServes, I don't believe so. I get mixed up with which subject does what, but Philip, do you know? This one doesn't have a component for placement, does it?
To my understanding, it doesn't. But I wouldn't.
Okay.
I did inquire, and that they said no, but
okay.
Maybe we'll park that for next week.
Okay.
Well, I've got 4 other subjects in my mind, so I know one does 80 hours, one does 160. But I'm pretty sure community services does not do a placement.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Let me just remind everybody who is out there watching the recording in Learning Land, don't forget your calendly.com link to a trainer across the week. You can email me with questions. Let me think. Don't forget to try and finish each assessment fully before moving on to the next one. And to get support, don't forget to reach out. We're here to help you. All right, take care. Bye.